Good afternoon. Very glad that you're here. Actually, I'd like to start today with an experiment, with something I never did before, honestly, if you're up for that. I'd like to ask you what really drives you. What is driving you? What is your why? Why are you doing what you're doing and not something else? Because obviously you could be also, I don't know, at Wall Street and making a lot of money, or sitting in front of a computer and speculating with Ether and Bitcoin. Might be a little bit more profitable than sitting here or doing whatever you do. So if you allow me, that would be an experiment, maybe 30 seconds, 45 seconds. Are you ready? Okay, go. Think about it. Okay, I see some people are already starting to check their emails. Maybe they are already through. So, if you allow me, maybe I can ask some people in one sentence what drives you. For example, this gentleman just in front of me.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, I think the mic is better.
Okay. I'm not quite sure, but I think one of the things that drives me really is working with the people I like, and I like working with my colleagues. I really appreciate that, and I can, we can do whatever we want in our company, and that's amazing.
You can do whatever you want. You like to work with your. What about you?
Oh, yes, I don't really do much, only studying at the moment, so I'm here. So, yeah, to meet new people and to do something better for the world, something that, yeah, maybe better for the environment, and working with nice people, as you said.
Yeah. Do something for the world. Yeah. Well.
Okay, so for me, it's also doing something good for the world, like social development. And I would also say to have flexible working hours, because I realize I don't work always 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, so that's also a reason.
Okay, so that's super interesting. Thank you. That was already an impression. What can be quite striking, I think at least some of you are entrepreneurs and are active, two of you, in the business world, in the economy. And both of you are telling me you're active not because you want to get like filthy rich and you know have a lot of money on the account, but you have a different purpose. You have like different purposes in life, and that sounds now, you know, super irrelevant, but it's actually very, very important and different from how our economy is set up. Because I just want to tell you, so to say, my why. I started, as this person said, my first business when I was 16 to actually earn some money from the theater group I was in. And I started a business that sold wooden toys and sustainable schooling materials, and later I started Mowgli. That's an organic food company that you might be able to buy our products in DM, Drogeriemarkt, or Edeka, and in around 40 countries around the world now. And there we are really excited to get children excited for good and healthy food. And that's what we told all our employees. You know, we're here, that's why we're getting up every morning. You're not working for me or, you know, or for my co-founder. You're working for that purpose. And then one of my employee at one day came to me and said, Armin, you're always telling us we're working for that purpose, but is that actually true? Are we actually working for that purpose? Or aren't we actually working for you? Because you can monetize everything. You know, you can sell the company, you can pass it on to your children, they can monetize it, you could extract profits. Aren't we actually just working to increase your wealth? Now, what would you answer if you're an entrepreneur, and you are? So I was thinking about it, and it struck me, because that wasn't my intention. Like you know, I had this idea of, you know, we're working together to achieve a purpose, to do something that, and money wasn't like, I didn't think of, you know, I wanted to create an organization with many people that increase my wealth. You know, come on, that wasn't. But I realized, juridically, like legally, my colleague, Sarah, she was right. Legally, she was right. They were actually legally working for me. And that somehow struck me. You can say, well, that's normal. And it is normal. It is, I just got a quick quote from a company that some of you might know, Voigt, a family-owned company in Germany. They have 42,000 employees and around 12 owners back in 2015. I think in the meantime, a little bit more. And in the Handelsblatt, so in the German business magazine, the CEO said, well, our task as the management is nothing else but to increase or develop, which is a euphemism, to develop the wealth of the family. That's the task of the management. So very simple, and that is not like unusual or unethical. That's how our system works. That's capitalism. That's our economy. So I just want to show you this sharp contrast. You know, I thought, you know, actually there's something wrong. I don't want the same situation where 40,000 people are actually working to increase the wealth of 12 people. Somehow something is wrong there. Although one has to say some of these 12 people, of course, donate a lot of money to good things, etc., but that doesn't matter. So that somehow was one of the reasons why I started to look for different forms of ownership, because I realized I had this idea together, you know, with my co-founder. We wanted to do something. We wanted to serve a certain purpose. Obviously, you know, like you just said, you wanted to do something great. And you wanted to serve. In the moment of incarnating this, of incorporation of that purpose into a legal reality. So in the moment of making it actually like a GmbH, limited company, whatever, in that exact moment, something changed. You weren't anymore the servant of that idea. You weren't anymore like working to do that together, but suddenly the idea served you in the moment of creating that GmbH, because in the moment of creating that legal entity, you are the owner of what? Of a thing. Like every company is a thing. In our German law, that's a, sorry? No. That's a thing. And as the owner of a thing, like, you know, this laptop is also a thing, and as the owner, I can use it for my benefit. I can destroy it if I like to, because that's maybe better for my health to not be so much in front of the computer. I can use it, so say, as much as I want, and do whatever I want. But somehow this exact notion, this legal notion of ownership, is also the notion that we have for our companies. And that somehow felt wrong. That's why I started to look around and think, is there something in the world, is there a different ownership understanding where, you know, my company with people isn't a thing? Because, you know, what is a company? People. Mainly without people, there's no company. And haven't we decided already, I don't know, 200 years ago that we won't sell and buy people and regard them as things? Well, so that's why I thought, okay, that's not what I want. And then the other thing that that really was a question for me in my company was, what's the long-term strategy here with my company? Usually, the American way how to build a startup, and everybody reads today about it, is either you make an exit to one of the big companies, or you make an IPO if you're super lucky, but this is basically it. And for me, that also felt strange, because that's why I was looking for a third way. How can I neither become, so to say, the servant of anonymous stock markets, or sell to very large companies that will not be able to maintain the same kind of mission that my company has. So these two things pushed me to look around. And the good thing is, there was a guy 130 years ago, this guy, who found a solution to the questions we were just discussing. I don't know who of you knows him. It's not Carl Zeiss. You might think that's Carl Zeiss. That's Ernst Abbe. He's the co-owner of Zeiss 130 years ago. And Zeiss is known, I guess. Zeiss is this technology company, produces like world market leader in optics, microscopes, and without them, none of your smartphones could be produced. They're in every smartphone. So Ernst Abbe, the owner of, his co-owner, Carl Zeiss, passed away. So in that moment, he really had to think about ownership of the company. And he thought for himself and asked himself, is this all my work? Back then, it was already a big company, not as big as today. But he asked himself, is this all my work? Have I done all this? No. No, all my employees did it. And even the invention of the microscope, and he was the inventor of the microscope, even the invention of the microscope was only possible due to many generations of scientists and researchers. So that was what he thought. So he wrote, and I quote now, "The law gives me the absolute right over that company. I'm allowed to take everything, but I feel that is not right. It doesn't all belong to me, it also belongs to society and to my employees." So what did he do? He realized there weren't any good forms of ownership that would reflect his thinking. He was an inventor, so he invented something. He took the legal form of a non-profit foundation, eine Stiftung, and he donated the entire company to that foundation. From that moment onwards, Zeiss has belonged to itself. It's the first foundation-owned company of the world. So until today, no anonymous shareholders or absentee owners, as you might call them, can steer Zeiss from far away, from Hong Kong or whatever. There are always people that I would call custodians or stewards, like from stewardship, stewards who are holding the control rights at Zeiss, the steering wheel, the majority of the voting rights, as long as they are connected to Zeiss. They cannot sell them, they cannot pass them on to the children, and all profits are reinvested or donated. Zeiss finances 2 large universities. The entire city of Jena was basically upgraded by Zeiss, and they are now 130 years old, highly successful. They survived several political systems. I went there just some months ago and asked the employees, and they said, the company belongs to us. That's so interesting. They are super intrinsically motivated. Like, they're motivated not because they get a lot of money, but because they know all their work, all their efforts are not to make somebody else rich for the private pocket of somebody else, but for the company and for the purpose of the company. And that is super interesting. And The good news is Zeiss is not alone. In the meantime, there are dozens of companies that have found a similar solution, a similar revolutionary solution that is at the same time today very time-tested and that redefines company ownership completely. So you see, for example, Philco, the Triodos Bank, Alnatura, and others that have found similar solutions. And the interesting thing is, you know, we spoke about the Voigt quotation at the beginning, where the management says, you know, we are in charge to maximize the wealth of our, of the family, of the owners. Here it's totally different. You know, there are only steward owners. They're not extractive owners in that sense. And you might wonder at the moment, you know, how do you finance these companies? I assure you, we'll come to that in a second. Now, I interviewed and most of these companies, went to them, you know, read all their treaties, etc., to find out what is so special about that ownership structure. And what I found out, there are two main principles that all of these companies have in common. One is the principle of self-determination, and the second is the principle of purpose. So that means that the principle of self-determination means the steering wheel of the company, the majority of the voting rights that, you know, all of your investors want to have. This steering wheel of the company is not tradable anymore. It's not a thing anymore. You cannot sell it. It is held in hands of stewards, of custodians, of people that are in what way, you know, doesn't matter, in different legal ways, stewards who cannot sell these, the majority of the voting rights, that cannot just pass it on to the children, but it's always kept within the mission family, within people who are connected to the company. So that's the self-determination thing. The second, the rule of purpose, the majority of the profits of these companies are reinvested or donated. So they're not active because they want to create profits. Of course, they're making healthy profits, actually very healthy profits, all these companies. But they see profits as a means to an end and not the end in itself. So it means that because they exist not to make somebody else rich, but because they really want to solve a problem in this world. You know, how strange is that? So there are different legal structures how you can ingrain these two principles of steward ownership into a company. One is very simple. That's the foundation structure. Some of you might know, for example, Dr. Hauschka. They have this kind of structure, so the foundation just owns 100% of all the voting rights. But there is also a different structure. And actually Bosch has that structure. So how does the ownership of Bosch work? In Bosch, you have the Robert Bosch GmbH, so that's the main company. And 92% of the shares with dividend rights are in the Bosch Foundation. It's a charitable foundation. But this foundation doesn't have any voting rights. So that means they cannot vote in the shareholders' assembly. They don't have anything to say. They just receive dividends or profits if there are any profits. And then there is a second entity. That's the Robert Bosch KG that holds all the voting rights but no profit rights. So in this entity, this is basically what I would call the steward entity. So they are the stewards, the custodians, die Wächter oder die, I don't know the best German word for that, of that company. They hold the steering wheel in that sense. They can decide where it goes to, but the steering wheel is disconnected from any primarily economic interest. They are interested in the long longevity of the company. They're interested in the purpose of the company, but not in getting rich, because they cannot get rich. There's no profit whatsoever going from here to there. That doesn't work. So now, and in there are 10 people, the Robert Bosch CEO and other C-level managers and former CEOs and other people from externally. And then there is, of course, still a little bit the family with 7%, but they are not receiving a lot. because actually the decision whether you give profits out or not, that's taken in this entity over there. So this is now one way how to structure this. And the interesting thing is, we were talking about ownership and the rules of ownership, and these are now very different rules. So the outcomes of these companies are also very different. And I show you how they are different. So first, the main difference of this company is, again, summarized here. The steering wheel of this company, the majority of the voting rights, is not sold to the highest bidder. If it's sold to the highest bidder, if you are selling the majority on a stock market, what happens? The highest bidder, let's assume it's a big fund, always needs to increase profits in order to earn back the price they paid. So the company needs to serve the owner. Here now, they have a completely different understanding of what ownership means. Because here, the steering wheel is given to capable stewards. And here, the owner serves the company, not the other way around. Here, in the normal capitalism, you have companies serving the owners. That's how it's defined. A company is there for its shareholders. In these companies, it's just the reverse. So, and this can make a very big difference. As Unilever just saw, but we can skip that. But this is an interesting statistic that I would like to show you, because the blue lines here, these are steward-owned companies, foundation-owned companies, and these are normal companies, the yellow, green, and orange lines. And what you see is, so on the y-axis you have survival probability, and here on the x you have the firm age. And after 40 years, these foundation-owned companies have a 6 times higher survival probability than the other normal companies. These are statistics from Denmark, where you have a lot of these kinds of companies. And then there's a lot more research in the meantime about them. You have not only higher survival rates, you have better profitability, you have higher wages for employees. These companies pay higher wages, you have a higher employee retention rate, which is obvious because everybody knows they're working for a purpose and not for a profit, etc. So many good things, but now to summarize, what is the big difference? What is the big difference? The big difference, I would say, is the question, who has the power in our companies? What is the mechanism that defines who has the power? So in our society, 1,000 years ago, if you were born into the right family, you had power over land and over people. And then we somehow came to democracy after a long time. And that same was true for the military and for many positions in our society. We thought, oh, actually, just taking the one who inherited, who's the son of somebody, or just selling something, that's not the right thing, Ein Amt, was zu verkaufen ist, that doesn't work. If you're a professor, and you just take your son into the same professorship, that doesn't work. So we understood meritocracy, so who's the most able, meritocracy or democracy. These are the mechanisms we want, and not plutocracy or oligarchy. Now the thing is, with the question of who owns our companies, who controls our companies, we are still in the Middle Ages. Because there are 2 big mechanisms that define who gets our companies and who gets the control over our companies. As Warren Buffett says, there's either the lottery of sperm, so, by chance you're the owner, or you have enough money. Like, for example, our dear friends from Saudi Arabia that just bought a big chunk of Deutsche Bank and Volkswagen, etc., because by chance they have some nice things under their ground, which we all need. So these 2 mechanisms that are not rational at all, not economically at all, these are just 2 old mechanisms from the Middle Ages that define who controls our companies. That's somehow strange. That's, I would say, also not very profitable in the end. So that's why we are here. This steward ownership approach is basically nothing else than the 3rd way. It's ability and value family. It's like a family business 2.0. It's, instead of inheriting your company to your blood relatives, it's always given to value and ability relatives. So now this is the completely new approach. And now when I learned all of that, I saw that's what I want for my company. The question was now how to do that, because setting up a foundation, I don't know, whether you thought about it, but that's highly complicated. To do that in Germany, that's highly complicated. So that's why I sat together with a lot of lawyers and thought about, how can we do that much more simply? And that's now what I'm gonna show you. We did it in the following way, and so first, that's my company, and then I said, okay, there are people that have shares, owners, steward owners, so me and colleagues. They have the voting rights, they control the company, but they cannot take out profits directly with these shares. This is a share class that has just the rights to steer the company. Now the question was, I told this to my employees and they said, great, but what happens? Armin, that's nice. Now you can tell us that we're not just working for your wealth. But what happens if a hedge fund comes along and just tells you, wait a minute, you have the majority, you have 99% of the voting rights, just change the charter, just change these complicated share classes and just sell the company. So we needed to find like a securing element. And that's what we created with a so-called golden share. So in my company now, there's one share which has just 1% of voting rights, nothing more. And that share doesn't receive any dividends, can't say anything in the normal business, but it has the right to veto any attempt that the steward owners have to change the charter in the relevant aspects. So, of course, we as the stewards, we can change the charter, but we cannot change it in a way that we make the company, again, a tradable commodity. That's not possible. That's blocked by this 1%. And who holds this 1%? This is now terribly important. We founded a foundation, the Purpose Foundation, that does this as a veto as a service, as we say. So it's our veto service provider, because we needed somebody from the outside who can say, I can really, credibly say, these people cannot change this and I will take care of that. So that foundation has in its charter the task to make that veto. And of course, there's some exceptions if you're almost bankrupt, etc. But generally, it does it. And it is also checked by the foundation authorities that the foundation works that way. And also, well, I come to the next point later. And then the question is now, how can you invest in these companies? This is now the big, is this an investor-friendly structure? Yes, it is, because we've got investment, and investors can invest, but with a different class of share. They invest without the right to steer the company, just with the right to get dividends and returns. So it's a different share class. It's a share class without a lot of voting rights, and even some early employees will have that. These shares. Now that was a lot, and that's why I give you like a little break in a second. But what I realized then was, there are actually so many entrepreneurs who need a similar service. So that's why we created this Purpose Foundation now, like as a foundation, as a service. So we help now more than a dozen startups and also some large companies to become steward-owned. And we set up 2 investment funds to invest in these kinds of companies. We help a lot of companies to go there. We do a lot of research. That's what Purpose does. And now, I promised you a little break. That's the break. Now you're going to hear, at least for 2 minutes, 2 entrepreneurs from Finland, Juho and Antti, who have founded Share Tribe, a platform that's like Shopify. You can open a shop with 1 click. With their platform, you can open a platform, like a bicycle sharing platform or something similar, with 1 click. And they have done steward ownership, and they will tell you why. Oh, there's something wrong with the... there's something wrong with the audio, because they are speaking actually in the video. Yeah, a bit louder. That there was this. There are different sounds. Yeah. Okay. Very strange. Okay, then let's. Don't know how that is. Yeah, there's something wrong with that. Okay, let's check whether the other video is better. No. Somehow you're filtering out the voices. I was giving the same presentation actually yesterday and it worked. So there must be something that filters out. Can we use just a micro and put it here to the...
Wait a second.
Okay. Can-
Hi, I'm Juho, co-founder and CEO of ShareTribe.
And I'm Antti, co-founder and the COO.
At ShareTribe, we are building a better sharing
Are you
economy.
hearing it?
We are helping
Not-
entrepreneurs and organizations to create their own sharing economy businesses by making platform technology accessible to everyone.
Sharing economy promises a lot of benefits. More sustainable consumption, less waste, more work opportunities and income for everyone. And it truly has great potential.
However, the sharing economy also has significant downsides. Today, it's dominated by a handful of global giants such as Uber, Airbnb, and Deliveroo. The problem is that these giants are extracting a lot of value and putting it into the hands of a small number of really wealthy people. At the same time, people working through these platforms are really often struggling to make the ends meet.
We want to build a sharing economy where we get the benefits it promises without the downsides. We see that in the future, there could be thousands of specialized local sharing economy platforms all around the world. These platforms will help people to use their belongings in a sustainable way while distributing the profits fairly.
When Antti and I traveled the world to tell people about this mission, they would often ask, how are you different? What prevents you from becoming just another extractive platform giant? At the time, we didn't have a good answer.
Then in 2017, we stumbled upon steward ownership. And that allowed us to create a structure that completely frees our management from the pressure of trying to extract maximum value from our users in order to chase higher profits. With steward ownership, we can make the binding promise to all the stakeholders that this company exists and will forever exist for its purpose, not just for making money.
We realized that what applies to the sharing economy applies to capitalism at large. Both have significant societal benefits, but both also bring significant problems.
ShareTribe's goal is to build a sharing economy where we get the benefits without its downsides. And what we see in steward ownership is a way to do the same for capitalism, to get the benefits without the downsides.
Now that we've transitioned to steward ownership, we are free to pursue what we care about the most. We have never felt as passionate, energized, and motivated as we feel today.
Okay. Can we, in the meantime, figure out whether we can somehow make sure in the next video?
What are the chances?
Okay, cool. Okay. Cool. So ShareTribe, as I said, this platform as a service, and they just did a successful crowd investing campaign of 1.2 million. We helped them with it, and they did it in the form of steward ownership. So they have now, I think, 460 investors who invested with that special class of shares. And they have this golden share here with the foundation, the steward shares, and then there are certain remuneration shares for the founders. So, but they are all capped. These shares are all capped. And yeah, 15 employees and quite a successful company. Now, I want to ask, are there any questions, or what are you not understanding? What kind of things are like strange for you or so? Can we make sure he can speak into the mic? Oh, thanks.
Yes, not an attack here.
Can I speak into that? Yes. Okay. Oh, that's cool. All right, so my question is, in the beginning you said that it's incredibly difficult to actually create a foundation. And I understand that's the reason you can't just put all your money in there. So, but how come that in the end, the golden share belongs to the foundation? So you ended up founding a foundation anyways?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But because it's so difficult, we founded just, because it's so difficult, we just founded one foundation that can so to say provide foundation as a service to many startups at the same time. That's a good thing now with this. Because of the golden share thing, we share the benefit of a secure setup of a foundation, but not everybody has to found his own foundation. At least as long as you're not big enough, you can always exit this model and found your own foundation, but you can never go back to normal capitalism.
Hi, yeah, I have one question, and that is, you know, the companies that you showed that are foundations now, they were started by traditional entrepreneurs, run as normal companies, and then transformed into foundations. And my question, and that is comparatively easy, because then you have someone taking the risk all the way until you have a profitable venture, and then transferring the value over to a foundation. Now, do you have any examples of a successful company started as a foundation, and A, and B, when you start a foundation, you have to put down fairly clear ideas of what this foundation is going to do. So if you do a startup and you do it as a foundation, you will be unable to pivot and start doing something else. So yeah.
Okay, thanks for these two questions. Should I repeat? So the first thing is, can you pivot if you have a foundation? The second is, are there any good examples of young companies growing from the very start with a foundation? The answer to the second question, can you pivot? Yes, of course, that's the whole idea. You know, the foundation, here, the reason why we founded a foundation that just holds a golden share is because the golden share has a veto right in the charter of that company and the article of association in German Gesellschaftervertrag, but it can only veto certain passages that are connected to the governance, which is this, you know, it cannot veto any pivot. It cannot veto any, you know, you can do whatever you want. You can pivot around. That's not a problem at all. Actually, if you look at Bosch, for example, they pivot quite a lot. You know, they are now in every Tesla and in every electro scooter that you are also seeing outside there. There's a lot of Bosch inside. And they did this already 15 years ago when all the other shareholder-oriented companies couldn't do it because they had so much pressure from shareholders. Bosch said, well, we do it because we think that's very important for the world and because we have the freedom, we can decide that. So there's actually, I would say, more freedom to pivot in these structures than in traditional public stock market structures. And there's at least as much freedom as also normal startup structures. So that's the question that was the answer to your second question. Now the first question, are there companies who started out like this? Yes, there are. There's one large company well, there are many companies that I could cite now. One interesting is in Switzerland that started out to help women in the beginning, like 50 years ago, and now they're like running a very large company. There is for example, one of the largest organic wholesalers in the US. And there's also a company that I would like to show you now. If the sound is good, let's check that. Because John from Ghost in the UK, he started out like this as well.
We chose to go the steward organization route because really it's the ultimate competitive advantage in terms of integrity. We're able to say to our users and our customers, we are not in this for money, we're in this for the long run. We are in this to do the best thing for our customers, for our users, for what's best for the product. We're not optimizing for an exit, we're not optimizing for an acquisition, we're not even optimizing for profit margins particularly. We're just optimizing for what we really think is right and what's best. And this company structure, this structure in general, creates unquestionable integrity. So if anyone questions our ways, we can point to the structure and say, look, we don't just believe this, we've enshrined it in the doctrine to make sure that we really stick to it. It ensures the longevity of the company, it ensures that we can never go back from what we said. And being able to say that has really resonated with our user base. We started off with an incredibly successful Kickstarter campaign where this resonated very strongly. We raised 10 times more than our initial funding goal. And we've gone on to become an extremely profitable, non-profit organisation over the last 5 years, from nothing to now over $1 million a year annual revenue. The subject of sticking to our integrity or sticking to what we set out to do has been really important because when we started out, we said we want to have this legal structure to prevent any weakness of human nature, any change of heart or change of mind in the future from affecting the ultimate outcome of the company. We want this to be really permanent. And within the first 2 years, we had seed funding offers on the table from investors, over $10 million for a Series A, and they were trying to convince us to change our structure or to find some way of doing something with share capital. And at that point, when you presented with a very large check, human nature does fail. Even me, and I consider myself to be someone with a lot of principles, was wondering, well, should we have gone this route? And having the structure in place that we chose from day one was incredibly reassuring and incredibly useful at that point to be able to say, we're sticking to our mission, we're sticking to what we set out to do, because we have no choice. And in hindsight, that's been one of the best things about it.
So the answer to your question is, actually it is even a competitive advantage for many of the startups. And I just give you another example of a startup, although it's maybe not a normal startup, that Sam Altman, the CEO of Y Combinator, and Elon Musk have started, OpenAI. So that's an initiative to program a lot of open artificial intelligence. And they knew if they wanted to get the best programmers, they needed to compete very differently to Google and Facebook, because Google and Facebook are paying millions to get the right AI programmers at the moment. So what did they do? They started a steward-owned company. They started a non-profit company, and they got really great people that worked at a department in Oxford and university and went there to do that. So, and I can give you many other examples. There is a startup that we helped to become steward-owned in the blockchain field, Yolocom. They are programmers, who know a lot with how to program the Ethereum protocol. They are called every day, and they get so big offers, and they are only capped inside that company because they know they're working here for the purpose and not for the wealth of some owners. So that is, by the way, the structure of Ghost. It's a very simple foundation ownership structure. And maybe the last video is Marlene from Zealware. She is also a startup from New York that we funded with our venture capital arm. Oh.
Yeah, so why did I build a team? I want to have some kind of positive impact on the environment and people having an opportunity and jobs and low-class jobs in America. I firmly believe that if you optimize for all your stakeholders, your shareholders will be better off in the long term. So for me, the step to actually become a steward-owned company was not so big anymore. the way steward ownership is set up is very much aligned with the way I'd like to build a company. Is where I want to build a good and successful and fast-growing company. I want all of that because for me that also feels like one of the only ways to really truly make an impact. That said, I do think the way we go about it is very important because otherwise your impact is limited. And I have previously, of course, been part of a successful startup that, in the time that I was there, raised $75 million. And although that was one of the best roller coaster rides of my life, and I enjoyed it very much, you also see what happens when the interest of shareholder and when the interest of the shareholders and the company's best interest and well-being are maybe not aligned anymore. When I learned more about steward ownership, I saw it tick a lot of the boxes of the values that I hold, and setting that in stone. So in the long-term future, Z will be governed like this, regardless of my presence, yes or no. Another example that I saw, there was an evening where a whole number of students from Queens had an event about startup. There was a startup evening, and I was one of the panelists there, and they were asking us a lot of questions in a Q&A. And one of the people in the group asked about what the best exit was, whether that was an IPO or whether that should be a private sale. And when I spoke more of the steward ownership and the idea of governance around it, when I was done with that, I just got a standing ovation. And I was like, yeah! And I'm like, wow, what is this? This is, a couple of people, 25 to 35 years old, who get really excited when it's been a very long day for them. So, the day after, I had like a whole bunch of emails in my inbox of people who wanted to be my intern for the summer.
So even as employer branding, it works quite well to be steward-owned. Now, I have to close now. I just want to tell you 3 things. One is, if you want to learn more, there's a booklet that looks like this that you can get for free on the tables that are right and left from the exit of that stage. Secondly, if you want to learn more, there's actually a Brand 1 article which you find online called Should We Fuck Capitalism? If you Google that, Brand 1, Should We Fuck Capitalism, you find that article. Third, I'll give a workshop on exactly the same topic. So if you have any question, in 7 minutes in room 3, so in the new work session, so you can go there to number 3. And the last thing is, these are, by the way, the financial instruments that you can use if you're steward-owned. The last thing is there's a big conference with more than 350 CEOs and entrepreneurs in Berlin. Speakers like, the GLS Bank boss, or Thomas Sattelberger, former board member of Telekom, or Albert Wenger, one of the most successful VCs in history, Professor Götz-Rehn, the founder of Alnatur. All of them come together in Berlin on the 30th and 31st of October to talk about ownership. So if you're interested, go there and go on that website.